Okay, this podcast is going to go into the discussion of meiosis, which is the cell division that results in gametes and sperm and egg being produced. We've already gone through mitosis and the behavior of the chromosomes during that process of cell division, and meiosis is very similar, but there is some differences in the production of gametes. We can start by mentioning that this process right here is going to produce the sperm and egg, which are haploid. Haploid means they have one set of chromosomes. The female egg and the male sperm have one set of chromosomes instead of pairs, which are a diploid cell. So after the sperm and egg unite through fertilization, they produce a single cell. The sperm fuses with the egg and it produces a single cell. And that cell is diploid because it combines the half of the chromosomes that exist in a sperm cell and the other half set of chromosomes that exist in the egg cell. So when those in humans, we're talking about 23. So in our regular somatic cells, we have 46 chromosomes, but the sperm and egg have 23. So the process of meiosis is how we get down to cells that have 23 chromosomes. And we have to have that so that when fertilization does occur, then we can be restored back to the diploid 46. Now we can say in meiosis we have two divisions. The cell divides twice. It divides first from one cell into two cells, and then those two cells divide into four cells. So there's really like two cell divisions that are included in with meiosis. Okay, so we can see that here in this diagram. So we start with one cell, and we use the same name for the phases. So the phases, the names for the phases, interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. We use those same names for the phases, but there is a little bit different behavior, and so we're going to look at that. But here is an overview of the whole process of meiosis that includes meiosis 1 and 2. So we start with our haploid cell, and or diploid cell, I'm sorry. So the diploid cell is just in its regular growth phase. And then when it gets ready to divide, now we are only talking about cells in the testes and ovaries because this is the site where sperm and egg will be produced. So we have our diploid cell, parent cell, and then it will produce its diploid cell replicated chromosomes. So it will replicate its chromosomes when it's getting ready to divide near the end of interphase. And then meiosis 1 begins, and at the end of meiosis 1, we'll look at all the steps, but at the end of meiosis 1, we have two cells. So this cell right here has divided into two cells, and it has half the number of chromosomes. And so it will have we will consider these haploid cells. Now these haploid cells will then go through another division, and that is called meiosis 2. That division will end with this cell will end with two cells, this cell will end with two cells, and each of these will be haploid as well. So this is the overview of meiosis 1 and 2 and the outcome. Now we can look at each phase of meiosis. So this is a diagram here that shows all the phases of meiosis 1 and 2. So we start right here. So we use the same names. Prophase is the first phase of this cell division. And some of the unique things that happen here in meiosis that do not happen in mitosis is something called synapsis and crossing over. And that's what is shown right here. When these chromosomes get ready to line up in the middle of the cell, when they get ready to line up, they match up with their homologous pair. Okay, so you have 23 pairs of chromosomes in your cells, and in meiosis, the first meiosis, they don't line up single-filely like they do in mitosis that we just learned about, but they line up with their pairs. So you have a chromosome, say chromosome 12. You have a chromosome 12 that you got from your mother, and you have a chromosome 12 that you got from your father. So those are called homologous pairs, and you have 23 of them, plus your sex cells. So those will line up with their homologous pairs along the equator here. So in prophase, they're getting together, and but what happens here in meiosis is when they're with their homologous pairs, they can actually switch genetic information from one chromosome to the other. And so that's something unique to meiosis. Okay, so that's in prophase. Metaphase is where they actually get lined up. So in humans, we'd be looking at 23 pairs of chromosomes lining up all the way across the equator. And then in anaphase, we are going to have where the chromosomes, the sister chromatids stay intact, but the chromosomes actually separate apart. The homologous chromosomes separate apart, and 23 of them go over here, and 23 of them go over here. And so at the end of telophase, in cytokinesis, we have a cell that has 23 chromosomes in it right here, and a cell that has 23 chromosomes here. So we did not split the chromosome in half at the sister chromatids, but we actually just pulled the two pairs apart. And so that's so a lot of similarities, but they pull apart from their pairs and not the chromosome pulling apart in meiosis 1. Now in meiosis 2 right here, these two cells then start meiosis 2 right away. And so these two start going through a second division. In this division, they do line up single-filely along the equator. So this is very similar. Meiosis 2 is very similar to mitosis. So the chromosomes will line up single-filely. We already have half the number of chromosomes because we've split from right here. We have 20, if we're talking about humans, 23, 23, 23, 23, and so they line up 23 along the equator right here, and 23 along the equator right here. And then they separate from their sister chromatids, just like in mitosis, where 23 half chromosomes go over here and 23 half chromosomes go over here. And so that occurs in this anaphase. And then in telophase, they start to form a new nucleus. And then cytokinesis, they'll split apart, and we'll have 4 cells that derived from this one cell. Again, these cells are just going to be our gametes, or sperm and egg. That's the only time that this type of cell division occurs, is for the production of gametes. Okay, here's a diagram kind of comparing mitosis and meiosis. Good diagram showing you what's happening in each one, the similarities and the differences there. So again, crossing over and crossing over and synapses are the two things that occur in meiosis that do not occur in mitosis. And that is the switching. You can see in all these diagrams the switching that occurs when they're with their homologous pairs right here. The different color on the end of these chromosomes is representing genes that have jumped from one chromosome to the other, and so they will be spread apart, and that gives uniqueness to the outcome of the haploid cells in meiosis. Okay, and that is where we end for this unit. And That's actually where, well, that's where we end for the chapter and where we end for the unit. So our next unit will be going into genetics, where we start looking at actually what's on these chromosomes, the section of DNA called a gene, and we'll learn about that and how it codes for traits that we have.